Experience!
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog, the Week 13 Power Poll, and a review of everything that happened. Maybe a little bit of look ahead as well. If you want the power rankings, they're down in the show notes in the free Mayo Media newsletter. Link is down there as well. Change up to the schedule for Thanksgiving week to make sure you got all your content out in front of you. The big one, live, 10 a.m. Eastern on Thursday morning. The best bets for both Thanksgiving and the Black Friday game. 2 spread shows this week. A best bet show coming out Thursday evening. And of course, the Thursday DraftKings picks with Ben Raza. But right now, Jake Ciely from The Athletic on the line to talk about the power poll. Do you have anyone other than the Lions in tier 1?
I kind of still want to put the Chiefs there. I think it's only one loss, but I was going to at least concede and say that I would take the Chiefs out of the number 1 spot at this point.
All right, well, I actually dropped them down from 2 to 3. I was very unimpressed with their win over Carolina this week.
I was too. I want to give Carolina some credit. Just it has nothing to do with taking the Chiefs as like one of the favorites or anything like that. But we know this. It was the best game of Bryce Young's career, and it wasn't just for the fact of like, oh, he's making some good throws. It was under pressure throws. He was stepping up. He was moving around like Kyler Murray. When you have that height issue, you have to work the pocket differently. And there was some, I'm not going to say like Bryce Young is fixed and his future as a starting quarterback is locked in and everything's good. But I do want to give the Panthers some credit, at least Canales some credit, because there was a lot that went right in that game. To your point, though, I mean, again, that's against the Spagnuolo defense. The Chiefs just, at this point, like the excuses of like, hey, like they're not playing their A game. Maybe, did you say that last week? Or I feel like we talked about it at some point. Maybe they don't have any A game. Maybe this is their A game.
Nah, see, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I am wrong quite often, as evidenced by my San Francisco ranking most of the year, and they just continue to not come through, albeit with a backup quarterback this week. That I feel like we had this conversation about the Chiefs last year on Christmas Day. It was like, man, they're just not good, and then January hits and everything is fine, and I don't know what to do with them, to tell you the truth. I put them at 3. So tier 1 is Detroit, and then tier 2, I have Buffalo at number 2, Kansas City at 3, Philly at 4, and Baltimore at 5. And I think you can make a pretty compelling case that Philly could probably be ahead of them at this point too, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think you can. The way that they're playing, I mean, Philly's without Devonta Smith again, and Philly keeps not missing a beat. This is the argument I've had for the Eagles is that I honestly have this entire tier. If you want to argue for them second, like straight up against Buffalo, I won't even have an issue with it because they're not missing anything from last year besides the beginning of the season, which the beginning of the season was a lot of the secondary is young and it stunk. And now, I mean, where's their flaw right now? Is that maybe they don't have a number 2. Well, they don't have a number 2 if Devonta Smith is out. I think it comes down to whether or not Smith is healthy, but they don't need him like they did last year. Like, honestly, Devonta Smith's season has been bad Deshaun Jackson's season for the comparisons that everybody wants to make to Deshaun Jackson, and they just don't need him because they have Barkley now. So it's basically that Smith has fallen to be in the 4th option, Hurts, Barkley, and A.J. Brown, obviously, and I think he's just almost like a complementary piece at this point. So I got to tell you, like right now, I could see the Eagles beating the Chiefs. I think the thing that sticks in our mind, and I agree with you brought this up way early in the season when it happened, it's just, it's tough to say that they're definitively on the heels of the Lions when the Bucs just have there's got to be a blueprint there. The Bucs have their number. So like, that's my biggest bugaboo with them.
Yeah, the Bucs may have their number, they may have the blueprint, but it might be one of those things where the pieces on the Bucs just match up against the Eagles perfectly, and
right.
Other teams can't replicate that.
Right, which is why I was saying I don't know if it's a blueprint thing, but I think the way that the secondary is coming together, Quinion Mitchell's what everybody hoped he could be. Well, Eagles fans hoped he could be when they drafted him, and that secondary is legitimately a super threat. I mean, Nakua didn't have a problem, but they limited Cooper Kupp. What he averaged, it was like a Wan'Dale Robinson game. It was like 4 yards of reception. So I think, look, going forward is that if you have that issue of facing the Eagles where you're going to struggle to pass against them, their run defense was already solid, and now their offensive line, that's what I was saying too, is like not missing a beat without Kelsey from last year. Where are they beaten? And I think it's going to come down to them and the Lions. So over the Bills, again, I can see a toss-up. I think a lot of it has to do with the Bills kind of having a similar style to the Chiefs and the fact that the power rankings and the fact that they're not 100% clicking, and yet they're still winning. So that's why I'm okay with this entire tier.
So with Baltimore, obviously they play on Monday Night Football. I do have an underdog play for Monday Night Football if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, I would love to hear. Last week, I was texting you back and forth, and they got ruined by freaking. Holy crap! Cooper Rush destroyed that pick.
Yeah, that was bad. He doubled the passing totals. That's not going to work. It happened to me too. I mean, the main play hit on the weekend, which is always great, and that's you're going to be guaranteed to win some money. But I had 3 5-bangers. I told you just before we came on air, if Chris Brooks doesn't end up in that game for the Packers because of the cramping for Josh Jacobs, he gets his catch for 15 yards. I had the lower of 5.5 receiving yards, and he was tied to 2 tickets that went 4 of 5 otherwise, and it was about $5,000 worth of money that would have been in my pocket if not. And then the main 5 play that I gave out, of course, went 4 of 5 because Tony Pollard goes way over his rushing number. At least Pollard was good enough to get it out of the way early, so I wasn't sitting there sweating it like I was with the other ones. It's like, oh, this ticket is dead. Like that, I don't need to worry about that. But tonight for Monday Night Football, if you use code Mayo, you get a free pick on Lamar, so you can add that to this one. I have Herbert higher 21.5 rushing yards, and Mark Andrews higher than 32.5 receiving yards. I know the Andrews one, most people I think will go with the lower, but I actually like this setup for Andrews. I know he's not going to run as many routes because likely he's going to be there, and we just haven't seen him do that. But when pressed in close games, when both are active, he still does turn to Mark Andrews generally in the second half to hit those seam routes, long third downs. And I think that on third down, you're going to see a lot of those this week with the Chargers putting them. I mean, I'm praying that the Chargers put them into 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 12s, that kind of thing. That's when he goes to Mark Andrews. So 3 catches should do it for Andrews, I think.
Yeah, well, the telling thing about Andrews, too, is it's kind of that James Conner usage is when they're tight, he sees more, but then when they're down or up, you see more of Likely or even Kohler. And then what you're talking about, too, is it also depends if they're running 12 or 3 wide receivers, because the 3 wide receivers is the concerning part for whether or not they use that enough to keep him out there, because he'll see some usage that, but it's weird. He comes off in 12 sometimes. So like all it boils down to what you're saying is that really is whether or not they keep it close.
So they're on tier. Baltimore's the last part of tier 2. The Chargers are the middle part of tier 3. I have Green Bay, the Chargers, and Minnesota as 6, 7, and 8. I just can't get there, man, with Minnesota. They just look bad whenever you see them. Yet they continue to win. They have one of the best defenses in the league. They can win games without Aaron Jones or Justin Jefferson, as we just saw. But it just seems like they want to give every game away, regardless of who they're playing.
Which is why I think we talked about it. I could see them being one and done in the playoffs. Is that's just that they have that kind of team, but like. It's funny that we've talked about them every single week, and yet when I got up this morning, like even though they won yesterday, I was like, they have like 3 losses, don't they? They're 9-2. How like you watch this team the entire year as we have, and it's like there's no way you deserve to be 9-2. It's almost the inverse of the Bengals. It's like, all right, we know they have some issues, especially on defense for the Bengals, but there's no way the Bengals should really be 4-7.
No, but the fact that they have the crap defense does lead them down. And,
right.
And the fact they haven't beaten anyone good. That's probably the most problematic part about the Bengals right now. They have 4 wins, and they're all against scrub teams. Anytime they've gone up against real competition, they just lose outright. Every time.
I don't want no scrubs.
Yeah, well, then you don't want any Bengals. Green Bay at number 6. Jacobs looks great, scores the 3 touchdowns. And Love had one of the good Love games, and it would have been even better if Christian Watson doesn't drop that easy touchdown catch at the end of the first half. But is there much you can really take away from the Packers beating, the tier 2 offense of the Niners?
I'm not taking too much away from it. Mostly, I would say it's about their offense just being able to not have any issues. And I know it's like tier 2 for this entire team, that being the 49ers. But it really comes down to, like, they were just efficient and clicking. And you mentioned that even without the drop, they were having a great day. With no Dobbs potentially going forward, like, they're fine. They got Reed, Watson, and now Wicks will step back up again. It's just they have depth. It's kind of almost like one of those fantasy teams where you don't have a superstar. Maybe you could argue it's Jacobs, but you don't have a Saquon Barkley or, like a A.J. Brown, but you have just a whole bunch of 2s. And this team is just so deep that they just plug people away. And that's like, again, I go back to their defense has been something to be concerned about in certain matchups this year, where you tell me Packers over the Vikings. Yes. Packers contend, make it close in a game with the Eagles. I think so. I think they can hang with the Lions. I think where you have them is proper. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they're even potentially top 2. I think like the second best record at the end of the season. It really comes down to what do they have the Eagles for the rest of the schedule. I know I was just looking at the schedules for the rest of the way, but the Eagles, what do they got? Oh, never mind. after the Ravens, the Eagles have the Panthers, Steelers, Commanders, Cowboys, Giants. So maybe they lose the Ravens game, and their Steelers is at home.
And maybe they lose the Ravens game. I don't let me forget this when I guess I'm doing the show this week, so I won't be talking to you between then and making my pick. But the Ravens dominate NFC teams. I always forget about that whenever they play interconference games.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They probably lose that. So you want to bet that early is what you're telling me?
I don't know. Most of the lines aren't on the board because the Ravens haven't played yet. Although if the Ravens lose on Monday night, you probably get the better number on the Ravens. Although I think that the Ravens beat the Chargers.
I do too. I think the Chargers are better than anybody expected. I mean, they are better than anybody expected. People thought this was going to be a top 5 picking team in the draft because first year with Harbaugh and then the Roman and changing the offense is like they're arguably you put it this way. You put the Chargers in the NFC, and if that first playoff matchup was Chargers versus Vikings, I would take the Chargers.
I would take the Chargers too, although the Vikings probably win because they seem to win every single week. The Vikings are weird. Like you said, you claim that they could be a one and done team. I agree with you, but the Packers and the Vikings likely have this 5 and 6 seeds in the NFC, unless Detroit falls off a cliff at this point, which means that they'll be matched up and probably favored at the NFC West or at the NFC South in the first round. Like they could both lose those games, but these are both teams that I could see going to the Super Bowl as well, just based on the way that they're constructed.
Right now, the Vikings would actually head to Atlanta.
Yeah.
Which means they're not one and done.
Atlanta could most definitely win that game. Kirk Cousins' revenge game, potentially in the first round for Atlanta and Minnesota. But the Vikings are probably favored in that game, aren't they? Like -1.
That's what I'm saying.
1.5.
I might even are we going to get Kirk Cousins wake up during the bye? Because Kirk Cousins has looked like trash heading into the bye. So
there's been every third week, Denver's defense does that to a team, though. Just makes the quarterback look awful. They didn't do that to Minshew. They did knock him out for the year, but he didn't look awful in that game.
No, but that was before just that game. It wasn't just that game where Kirk Cousins has started to play like garbage. So, and actually, to your point about this, the current number 3 seed is the Seahawks.
Yeah, well, let's take a look.
6-5, winning that division.
Let's take a look at the NFC playoff picture for a second, just to see if we can navigate, because it seems like 6 of the teams are very safe, and then you have the 7th spot right now, which would go to Washington. But Washington has a pretty easy schedule. We just saw they could lose to the Cowboys, and then you have all of these chasers. Who do you think ends up with the 7 seed? Because do you think it's gonna? I think it's gonna be the Bucks, if I had to guess.
I know, and I know we're rooting for you for that pick for the Bucks, that bet that you already made. Let's see, they get Panthers, Raiders, Chargers, Cowboys, Panthers, Saints. I mean, we already know that doesn't get much better than that, which is why people are stashing their defense in fantasy, even though their defense is garbage. The one that I was going to say besides Washington, I was trying to think Arizona off the top of my head. Yeah, they head to the Vikings, Seahawks, Patriots, Panthers, Rams, 49ers. Definitely a tougher stretch, and I mean, so much for that being a shootout yesterday. What the hell was that garbage?
It was a lot colder and a lot more rainy than I think that any of us expected in Seattle.
It was misty rain. Like that should not. The weather, no, that was just garbage play by both. Watching that game, that would have in a dome. That would have been the same outcome. They both played like garbage in that game, except for Jackson Smith and Jigba.
It's funny that although the Seahawks won, they vault to the top of the NFC West. Geno played like trash in that game. Well, that's what I'm saying. Everybody did. He was trying to give the game away. I mean, Kyler did give the game away. But there was one where, I forget when it was. Forget if it was at the end of the first half or early in the second half, where Geno just could have run for a first down and in the red zone instead just threw a pick. Just like, oh, there's 10 points right there. Right, great. Nice move.
And on the flip side, I'll like the Seahawks defense is not good, which we've said attack their pass defense. But
I don't know. Like they got some guys back the past 2 weeks. It has been really good.
So that's where I was going with this. It's gotten better, and then I was going to say, similar to your argument last week about what the Jets did with the Colts with Anthony Richardson, it was kind of like if you watch that game with their pieces back and being better. That's what I was saying. Like they were not good. You passed all over them. They've started to turn. I'm not saying they're a scary defense, but also their game plan yesterday with their pieces back was, we're gonna go throw to McBride as much as you want. We're gonna bottle up Walker and Charbonnet, and we're going to take away Marvin Harrison, and then what do you have left? And that's kind of what they did. It's like Kyler, and the point being is while it's different than Anthony Richardson, is Kyler still to this point of his career now where he's at, does not want to run like old. Like if Kyler was running like the 900-yard Kyler Murray or 800 that one season, like there would have been a different game plan there. I think they felt like, hey, you know what? This Kyler is not the one we need to be afraid of, and we'll just take away this aspect of the game, and then we'll see what he can do. And honestly, the way he played that game, I mean, you want to draw the comparisons, there was like Bryce Youngness at times yesterday.
More mobile still than Bryce Young, however.
I still think Bryce Young just chooses not to run as much, kind of like Caleb Williams. But yes, still mobile.
Yeah, it's not so much on the running in terms of rushing yards, but Kyler can like get away from defenders. Bryce Young, not so much.
Okay, yeah. No, agree there. So anyway, I was going to say Cardinals. I don't like it. So I think it comes down to Commanders, Bucks. And the only reason I still think that's in play is because you have that game difference. And then conference, I think, actually they're tied in the conference.
They are, but the Bucks hold the tiebreaker on them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is they just got to get even with them.
The thing
I think it comes down to those two teams.
Washington's end of season schedule, like you went through Phillies, Washington's pretty easy as well. Like, what do they need to get to? If they get to 10 wins, they need to win 3 more, and they have 3 very winnable games on the rest. Like, they're at home against the Titans. Like, they got to win that. And then they're at the Cowboys in Week 18. They got to win that. Those need to be 2 wins for them. Then they need to pick up 1 against the Falcons, Eagles, or Saints. And it's at the Saints. And the Saints look like a different team right now, at least the past 2 weeks. They don't quite look like
since the coaching change.
Since the coaching change, and since they got Marquez Valdez-Scantling, since they got that vertical threat back in their offense, plus Taysom Hill is healthy again. Like, he was hurt for like 4 weeks. Missed some time. He was playing through injury. Derek Carr was out for a while. And now that they seem to be back as close to full health as they're going to get, I don't think that we see Olave for the rest of the season. But they're not an easy out at this point, whereas 4 weeks ago, Washington, even at New Orleans, is probably favored by 6.5 in that game. Now it's probably like a coin flip.
I would agree with you. So I would say I wouldn't even leave that Cowboys game up for question. I'd want that Cowboys game to be meaningless for them.
That you would want it to, but if they lose, let's just say that they're not going to be favored against Atlanta. They're not going to be favored against Philadelphia. So let's say they lose those 2 games. They have to win the other 3 in order to get to the 10 wins.
I was saying maybe they can pull off the Falcons.
Listen, they could beat the Eagles too. Like they could win games that they're not supposed to win. We just saw the Titans beat the Texans, and we just saw the Cowboys beat Washington. I'm just saying that if everything goes to chalk, if they get to the 10 wins, they're probably safe, because the Bucs can still get to 10 wins, but that would require them beating the Chargers. That's their tough game left, and then they run the slate. I mean, the Bucs at 9 wins could most certainly be there, but the Bucs at 9 wins could win the division too. Like if Washington beats Atlanta, and then Atlanta drops another game along the way, let's say they lose this week against the Chargers, then it's like neck and neck with the Bucs and Atlanta for the division win.
Yeah, it would be. So I think we've got, 4 teams locked in, and that's it?
4 teams locked in for what?
For the NFC.
Yeah, 5. You have the Lions.
Where's the...
I guess I'm just giving a division winner. I guess they're not specific teams. That there has to be one from the NFC South and has to be one from the NFC West.
I was saying... Yeah, but we don't know who that is. That's what I was saying. We got Lions, Eagles, Vikings, Packers are the only ones that were like saying they're in 100%.
Do you think it comes? When does Green Bay play Minnesota again? Because that might be like the hinge game of all hinge games. Can you look to see who has the tiebreaker between if Green Bay beats Minnesota in the next game and they have the same record? Who would end up having? Because that game is when? Week 17? Yeah, week 17.
Week 17, but then they have Green Bay's got Chicago after that, so... the division, it's 1 and 2 and 2. We don't know as of today, because if Green Bay beats Minnesota but then loses to the Bears, Minnesota still got. There's too many division games left for both of them.
Okay, well, let's say they basically run the table here. I guess the Green Bay has to play the Lions again. The Vikings also have to play the Lions again, don't they?
Lions.
Yeah,
I know
they played. So this could work out.
The last game of the week. Yeah.
This could work out huge because if Detroit has everything locked up and they don't put out a full complement in Week 18. Oh no, the Vikings have Detroit twice, don't they? They have them in 16 and 18. So if they beat them in, if the Lions win in Week 16, they might have to sit everyone in Week 18 against the Vikings.
But if they lose,
but the 5 seed is so important in the NFC. I mean, if you put the Eagles close to the Lions, I guess it doesn't matter as much. But if you get the 5 seed, you basically get the chance to avoid the Lions, maybe, instead of having the 6 seed where you'd almost be guaranteed to play them.
True. But then it also comes down to there's still a world where the Lions don't even end up with the number 1 seed. And I don't know, like, which is better, avoiding the Lions or avoiding the Eagles? I think they're both terrible.
It's not a great situation. The Eagles feel more beatable than the Lions do. And this is why I want to circle back, because let me read you some MVP odds for the moment, the updated MVP odds.
Oh, my God.
Shout out to our friends at CoolBet for their odds. Josh Allen is the overwhelming favorite right now. He's plus 135. Lamar Jackson is 2.5 to 1, plus 250. Saquon Barkley is 6 to 1 to win MVP. If you bet this, I have real estate that I would like to sell you. I don't know if it really exists or not, but I will take your money, and maybe in the future it could come to fruition. Like, what are we doing? 6 to 1 to win MVP for Saquon Barkley? That is insane.
So it's funny that I threw up a screenshot of Barkley's last 6 games, basically since his revenge game against the Giants, and somebody was like, "You'll know better than I would. Is that one of the all-time best fantasy seasons for a running back?" I was like, well, if you consider 19th one of the all-time best, and this is where I'm going with it. So Super Bowl era through 11 games, Barkley's 19th in fantasy points, and LaDainian obviously that number 1. But I wanted to bring up CMC was 7th through 11th games, and the CMC did not win the MVP that year, which is the CMC season. Then no running backs winning the MVP.
It's not even that. I don't even think he's the most valuable player on his own team. Eagles 8-0 with A.J. Brown. 8-0. When they don't have him, they're 2-2. And I've said this when he was out. This is what I said to you. He makes that offense go. He opens everything up. Like, is there any better team that Barkley could have went to than the Eagles? And this isn't to take anything away from Barkley. He's probably going to win Offensive Player of the Year. It's between him and Derrick Henry, maybe Jamar Chase down the line if he continues to put up these like video game type numbers. It's just the Bengals aren't good. Maybe Burrow ends up winning Offensive Player of the Year because he shouldn't be in the discussion for MVP because his team might win 5 games, but he might throw 50 touchdowns. So like that's worth something too. But you have a deep threat receiver that needs to be doubled or tripled most of the time, and a running quarterback to make sure that box is free. Like there's no better place for Barkley to have gone to than the Eagles.
No, it's a perfect. Well, there's probably 2 or 3 teams at best, but. Yeah, this is a great spot for him. Even with the Jalen Hurts taking those touchdowns, and we were joking about the fact that how many times Barkley was tackled at the one. The funny thing is like the past 2 games for them, Barkley's been like, screw it. I'm not going to get tackled at the one. I'm just going to run it in from 30 yards out. Screw you guys.
Like if you're looking at real MVP odds, not that I'm betting on Herbert at 25 to 1, but he is more likely to win MVP than Saquon Barkley is.
No, all the quarterbacks are.
Goff is.
Even as bad as Jared Goff was.
Jared Goff wasn't even bad against Indianapolis. Just there's no. I just. Can't.
I meant the interception game.
Sure, but like just even if he hadn't had the 5 interception game, I just don't see a reason for anyone to give Jared Goff the MVP. If you were to
neither do I. That was my argument.
If anyone was going to rank the best players on the Lions, Goff would be like 13th or something like that.
Wait, were you just bringing it up, or weren't you campaigning for him like 3 weeks ago?
Absolutely not. I don't know who you're talking to, but that was not me.
Okay, I just want to make sure. That's why I asked. I'm just making sure.
It's been my case all year long. Like, Goff is good. He's good on the Lions. He is unimportant to their success at a very, very high level. Like, even before the show, I was talking with Paul. I was like, if you put Tua on the Lions, would they be better?
Possibly.
He does everything that Goff does, but he doesn't have the mobility. Like Goff has like sneaky athleticism. Tua just can't run. He just can't run anymore. Like they don't want him running. So at least they can like move pockets with Jared Goff. But if you just want quick throws and accuracy, like that's exactly what Tua does.
Yeah. And so it's a really good point for that. I think there's a lot of quarterbacks you could put on the Lions to be like, yeah, they're just as good, if not possibly better. But you know how I feel. When we brought up this conversation, however, the very first time 2-3 weeks ago, whatever, it's still laughable to me. I would still bet Lamar Jackson. The fatigue is the most BS argument ever when it comes to MVPs. I'm saying you're making it, but I brought up, this. I said it when the Derrick Rose thing, and I was a Bulls fan at the time. Like, Derrick Rose did not deserve that MVP. LeBron did. Stop with the fatigue nonsense. Lamar Jackson's the MVP. Done. Period. End of story.
Yeah, that's not how you're supposed to bet, though, Jake. You need to factor that in. If people aren't going to give it to him, you don't want to bet on the guy they don't want to give the award to. That seems like bad strategy.
Oh, then you should lose your your ballot. You shouldn't have any right. But that's why I'm still betting Lamar Jackson, because I think there's enough people that aren't going to be like, oh, I'm just not voting him.
I mean, I think Allen's having the better year right now, doing it with a lesser team, especially offensively, that if all things are equal between the two, that Allen is going to win.
I don't think he can. No, I wouldn't.
I mean, I don't want to bet him at plus 135. He was the bet when he was 6-1 like 3 weeks ago. But you just see the fluctuation in this market. And the MVP doesn't even really matter until December anyway.
Sure, but we're also talking about, like you said, like better, and I've seen that argument before about better with lesser talent and all that type of stuff, but we're talking about somebody who's still on a non-passing offense, still has, 200, 300, 400 more passing yards and 6, 7, 8 more passing touchdowns than Josh Allen? Like, and that's Lamar Jackson, who doesn't throw. Like,
I mean, Jake,
still,
you have to remember, this isn't the fantasy MVP. This is the NFL
I didn't
MVP.
say fantasy MVP. He's kicking his ass in passing.
That's great.
Done. Period.
They're going to look at the standings, and if Buffalo finishes ahead of Baltimore, Josh Allen's going to win. That's how this award is given out, Jake.
It shouldn't.
And if Lamar doesn't have 5,000 passing yards and 45 touchdowns, it's not going to happen. Now, if Allen falls off, if Allen falls off and doesn't continue to put up the numbers that he's putting up, and Buffalo loses some games, then yeah, he's going to be out of it, and Lamar is going to win. But if Buffalo just stays on cruise control, like if they beat the Niners this week, they have a pretty fluffy schedule to end the year. They should be fine. And when you take a look at who the best teams are, it's the Lions in terms of point differential, and then it's Buffalo. And when you point to Buffalo's offense, it's hard to put up the gaudy numbers because he doesn't have the talent. It's a lot like Lamar last season, where like, oh my God, he was able to put up these numbers with these jabronis around him, and no one else had that big year to go against him. The only guy that's having the big year to go against these top guys is Burrow, and he's just not going to win.
No, because Lamar's still doing it has no defense, which is why he has to do it even more so on offense this year.
Or maybe he has to play catch up in some of these games a little bit more, and that's the reason.
And he's doing it.
Sure. They're 7-4. They're 2 games behind Buffalo.
And we just had an argument 2 weeks ago about how this team could have one loss, about like you just take the 1 foot.
We can argue about where they are in the power rankings, but where they are in the actual standings matters to the MVP voting. It's like you've never bet on the MVP before.
No, but I get that, but it doesn't just mean because you have a 1 or 2 game better record that people don't vote for you just because you have the lesser team that's still in the playoffs.
Yeah, but Lamar's already won the 2 MVPs.
And he deserves a third.
They're going to find a reason, if things are equal, to give it to the guy who hasn't won one before. They are. That's how voting works.
I'm not saying I disagree with that. I'm just saying because he's on plus money odds, I'm still going to take Lamar versus the favorite because we're still, as you said, still have to get through December.
Sure, but it's not like Josh Allen isn't plus money too.
But you said he's the favorite at minus.
No, he's plus 135. He's the favorite.
Nah, that's barely plus.
You lose this one, pal. It's the best feeling when clothes fit good and look good, and you can comfortably wear them all day long. And that's exactly how I feel about my clothing from Doers. These are the most comfortable pants I've ever owned, and I'm reaching for them every day. Unfortunately, I get dirty. I got 2 little kids. And when you got 2 little kids, you go through a ton of laundry. So it's not like you can just clean clothes every single day. You gotta wait for that stuff to pile up at the same time. But I wear my Doers as often as possible. I got 4 pairs right now. My wife, let me tell you, it's working. It's working for me with Doer, and they have styles that can be worn all year round. Their stretch performance denim and lifestyle apparel is built for doing. I love my Doers, and now's the time to get your own because Doer's Black Friday sale is on now. They've got up to 50% off these incredibly comfortable pants, and this is the best time to upgrade your wardrobe before the new year and find some amazing holiday gifts. Doer sale runs through December 2nd, but don't wait. These items will sell out fast. So go to shopdoer.com/PME to get these great deals before they're gone. That's shopdoer, DUER.com/PME. Shopdoer.com/PME. Introducing the TGL presented by SoFi, golf's newest league live on ESPN and ESPN+. It's sharp and it's electric. How is it sharp? How is it electric? Picture this. 2 hours of hammer-dropping, overtime-forcing, playoff on-the-line golf with 24 of the best players from the PGA Tour, like Tiger and Rory and more, split into 6 teams. Atlanta, Boston, Jupiter, LA, New York, the Bay. This isn't your average Sunday pickup game. To learn more, visit tglgolf.com and tune in to the inaugural season beginning January 7th. Keep up. It's golf. As we enter the holiday season, there's always a lot of people that just don't handle this part of the year all that well. I've seen it in my own family. And if you're thinking about giving therapy a try, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Mayo to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/PatMayo. The holiday season's when people start to fall off from the routine. I know that I've fallen into that trap before, but I found now that I've started drinking AG1 every morning, it gets me on the path of where I need to be so I don't lapse at this time of year. And right now, AG1's running a special Black Friday offer for all November. AG1 is a daily health drink packed with nutrients to help you alleviate bloating, support sustained energy, and whole body health. But here's the key. You dump in a bit of water, half full of the bottle they send you. You dump in your scoop of AG1, cut that with your favorite juice. I like orange juice, so I cut it with orange juice. You shake that up, you pound it back. Not only is it delicious, you also feel great at the same time. And the energy boost it gives you over something else that you might consume in the morning is basically immeasurable, at least to me at this point. So this holiday season, try AG1 for yourself or even gift it to someone special. It's the perfect time to focus on supporting your body with an easy and surprisingly delicious daily health drink. And that's why I'm so excited to be partnering with them. Every week of November, AG1 will be running a special Black Friday offer for a free gift with your first subscription, in addition to the welcome kit with vitamin D3 and K2. So make sure to check out drinkag1.com/Mayo to see what gift you can get this week. That's drinkag1/Mayo to start your holiday season off on a healthier note. Well, supplies last. Tier number 4 for the power rankings. I have two teams, Pittsburgh and Denver, are just sitting there. You can make a case that Pittsburgh's not going to make the playoffs, which I find hilarious. Like, all of their games left are tough. That they should make the playoffs. They should go at least 500 the rest of the way. But they just lost to the Browns. They get the Browns again. They got a lot of these division games coming up. Like, it wouldn't be crazy to see them get swept.
Yeah, but what's their swept? I don't know. Like, I was gonna say, let's say they only get one more win the rest of the way.
That gets them to 9.
9-8, and that still possibly gets them in. Honestly, because we talked about that last week. Is that it's almost like the 7 are already locked in. The only chance is there's an outside chance that Miami catches the Broncos, maybe, and that's just for the 7 spot, and that's hoping that they can get to 9-8 or even maybe 10 wins. If to get to 10 wins, the Dolphins can only lose one more game the rest of the way, and it's not like they have a great schedule. It's kind of middle of the road. So I'm just saying, like, even 9-8, they might skirt in. So I think the Steelers are safe, even with that tough schedule. It is a brutal schedule down the stretch.
I mean, I think that they had like a 92% chance of making the playoffs or something like that. When you look at the schedule, and it's at Bengals, home Browns, at Eagles, at Ravens, home Chiefs, home Bengals. Like I said, it's probably 3-3. It might be 4-2, but there is a world where it's 0-6 at the same time, which would just be, and they still might get in because of that. But I just thought it was funny.
I also, you know what I think is funnier? Well, maybe not as recently of 3 years ago, newly minted fan of the team, but I think there's a more likely world where the Texans actually lose that division to the Colts.
I just don't see the Colts getting there is the problem. Like, the Colts are really
their schedule is set up for them. I know.
Look, I agree. And, like, their hinge game is 2 weeks from now at the Broncos. We already talked about that. If they lose that, their only path really to make the playoffs is to catch the Texans. But what are they against the Texans? They lost to the Texans. They need to get done. They need to get ahead of the Texans, too, because they're already 0-2. So they don't even hold the tiebreak in that spot.
Did, yeah. They lost both of them. Okay, so the Texans, Jaguars, lose to Dolphins, Chiefs, Ravens. I mean, that's that 3-game stretch. That's why I'm saying it, is that the Texans could go 3 in a row, so that's 8, and puts them at 8-8, and then at the Titans to finish out the season when the Colts have the Jaguars. I mean, it might come down to week 18 for them.
It might, but I could still see 8-9 winning this division because they have the tiebreak.
Sure, I'm just saying if they lose, if they go 8-9, and somehow the Colts win that last game and go 9-8, that's obviously what it would take. And if the Texans pull off a win against the Dolphins, Chiefs, or Ravens, which if they're playing their best game possible that week, it's all possible. As you just mentioned, for some of the other teams that didn't see happening, then they're obviously already there. So.
The problem with
you said things that was surprising. I actually think it's surprising that the Texans are now in this boat, that we're even having this conversation.
Yeah, it's funny. I have to go look it up right now what the updated Super Bowl odds are, because I was looking at the Texans are still they were as high as 50-1 last night. They're back down to 30-1 right now. It's not that I think that they're going to win the Super Bowl, but at 50-1, I did have interest because I just think that they're going to be there and they're going to have a home playoff game, and their entire final stretch. Granted, if they beat the Jags this week, once they do that they need to figure out something with the offensive line. If they can figure that out, and I'm not talking about getting new players, whether it's a new scheme, playing jumbo packages, whatever it might be, something to keep C.J. Stroud upright and have a chance to throw the ball. If they could do that and give him a little bit of time, I still think that they're dangerous because the rest of their team is still pretty good.
It is the biggest issue. And it really comes down to the offensive line, like you said, is that the offensive line can get anything going. But how do you fix that at this point? The Nico Collins coming back, but yesterday was a good barometer, honestly, for like saying, okay, is Nico Collins the difference of what can do even with CJ Stroud under pressure? And it just didn't work. I don't know how you get more offensive line protection for it. Like I don't know how this gets fixed at this point of the year.
It's probably playing a tight end as the sixth offensive lineman, playing like jumbo sets with basically 7 offensive linemen out there, and then obviously you're taking away from your passing game, but you do generally run the ball really well. And Collins now has 2 deep touchdowns taken away the past 2 weeks due to I don't want to say that they're phony illegal man down the field penalties, but they're pushing it.
The first one was legit. The dude, I forget who it was, but that first one where it would have been the first touchdown of the game that ended up going to Joe Mixon instead, he was a good 4 yards upfield before they even threw the ball. Yeah. He just totally, I don't know if it was he was oh, by the way, I forgot I was supposed to be timing on this one, but he just took off.
In the first round, as of this, I think the Ravens still win the North. So it'll probably be Pittsburgh or the Chargers at Houston in the first round.
Right now, it's the Chargers.
Right now, it's the Chargers. And the Chargers are probably, a 2.5. It's a lot like that Minnesota-Atlanta game. The road team might be the favorite, but if Houston ended up winning by 10, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
It wouldn't shock me, but yeah, I think that as of right now, the way that both teams are playing as of right now, and things can change. We still have a full month plus. I think I'd take the Chargers, but it wouldn't shock me. The Texans, like I said, they have to have their game plan, but the problem is like we just saw, Titans with a decent defense that can bottle up Joe Mixon. You take that away because that's their only escape right now from having a terrible pass blocking offensive line. That you take that away, and it's they just can't do anything else. They just fall apart.
No, and they gave up 2 big plays to the Titans as well. The Nick Westbrook-Ikena touchdown, then the Chig touchdown a little bit later on. That is atypical of that defense by and large. They do give up some big plays, but Pollard was able to run all over them, which was shocking to me.
That was a big one too. I wasn't expecting that. Even with that workload, I only had Pollard for fantasy purposes to bring that in. I still only had Pollard as a mid RB2 just because the volume was just a bad matchup that he just didn't have a problem with.
So I have a big tier 5, most of which is comprised of the AFC or the NFC West teams. So Pittsburgh and Denver at 9 and 10. Then it's Seattle, Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Houston, Washington, and Arizona from 11 to 16. Poor Washington, man. Do you think that they can write this?
They can. The problem for them is they also have maybe they need that bye. And the good news is that it looks like they weren't lying about the fact that Jaden Daniels was healthy again, because they were saying, the struggles, and Cliff Kingsbury got asked about why his offenses fall apart in the second half of the season. He's like, oh, show me the data on that. And he's like it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it almost seems like a ha-ha gotcha moment. It looked better at times, but it still had issues. Go back to that game. And for anybody that didn't watch it and just see the box score, I know the fourth quarter was nuts, but also the fourth quarter was basically the first time that entire game where the Washington offense was like firing all cylinders. Like it was pretty bad up until that point. For anybody who has Terry McLaurin in fantasy on their team, knew how bad it was until that fourth quarter and that big play. So I don't know that they're fixed. And then they get the Titans in a bad matchup, and then they hit their bye, and they come out of the bye to get the Saints. But we just talked about, maybe if we were talking 3 weeks ago, it'd be like, cool, they come out of the bye, easy matchup with the Saints. Maybe not so much anymore. Eagles, Falcons, Cowboys to finish things out, and Cowboys on the road. Do they get it fixed? I think the biggest thing is, does Kingsbury adjust? And it seemed like he started to yesterday, and a little bit actually within that game. But I think it really just comes down to the Kingsbury offense. The problem is, and I forget who it was. I think it was Ted Wynn for the Athletic, but somebody sent me down this path, and I'm like, I'm very interested. They're talking about the Kingsbury offense, and I found out their Kingsbury offense with Jaden Daniels especially, and actually to go back to the years that it dropped off with the Cardinals, it's all about the second read. The second read's ADOT is under 3 yards. That's ridiculously low. So it's basically like, read, if it's not there, dump it off. Read, dump it off. And partly it's because it's running backs, but it's dump offs. Little Alameda Zacchaeus and Luke McCaffrey is 2-3 yards away from the quarterback. And as you see defenses, it's like, all right, we'll take away the one guy, but we'll keep everybody close because either you're going to run or throw it short, and we know what you're doing. And I think that's the problem.
Well, and they try to throw to Noah Brown a lot, and he has yet to make a contested catch yet this season.
I was going to say an easy catch. Like, either. Like, he's turning normal catches into 50-50 balls, too.
Yeah, anytime there's a defender within, 2 yards of him, it's just not being caught. It's not happening for him.
Or if it's dead in his hands, you might get it caught 60% of the time.
But Brian Robinson gets hurt with the ankle. Eckler sustains the concussion on the kickoff. Robinson got hurt early, came back, and then left. So I think it's a pain management thing. I'm guessing that he might be okay, and then if after the bye, he'll be fine. I do worry about Eckler a little bit with the concussion. It's his second this year.
His second this year, and it was a bad one, that kick return. I don't know that Brian Robinson plays this week because he was dealing with that. It was questionable. Then he didn't play for 2 weeks, and then he came back. He's been dealing with his injury issue. If it's a different injury, I think either way you cut it. If it's a different injury, it's going to be like, well, we have the bye coming up. Let's make sure he's 100% so he can try to make the playoffs. And if it's the same one, that's obviously the more likelihood of him not playing this week. So I think Brian Robinson, I think it's going to be Jerry McNichols, and maybe they bring back Chris Rodriguez because they actually cut him this weekend. So I don't know, but you got Tennessee and then a bye. Like, why play either of them? Eckler's probably definitively out, but why play Brian Robinson?
Yeah, I can see that. So McNichols is probably the only running back pickup this week for fantasy.
Outside of all the backups.
Yeah,
this is the time.
Yeah. I guess you could pick up.
I've done this for years. Like now's the time where we're like, stop with your stupid bench players of like, oh, I might be able to start him. No, Benson's, Charbonnet's, Corum's, even of the world. Like we have this conversation all the time. You should have started that last week.
Yeah, Roshan would be the other one, just because his high utilization rate in that offense, and he's their goal line back. If Swift went away,
no, that changed yesterday. That actually changed yesterday. He got the one goal line carry, and then the rest of the game, they gave him all to Swift. I actually have that. We're going to talk about it on the Sirius XM show today. It was weird. They actually started using Swift in the short yards and the goal line for the rest of the game.
I'm saying if Swift is out, you want Roshan.
Oh, yeah. Okay, 100%, yeah.
Yeah, I would just throw him on that list with the backups. I actually think he's a higher end backup because he does stuff anyway, week-to-week basis you know that the workload would be shifted to him. Without Herbert around, there's no one left. It's just him.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, okay. Yeah, 100% agree.
So tier number 6 is San Francisco at 17, Miami at 18, Cincinnati at 19, the Rams at 20, Indy at 21, Chicago at 22, and New Orleans at 23. Miami is the only team that could really go on a run here. I suppose if Cincy won out and got to 9-7, they could throw a wrench into this, but the Dolphins have to beat the Packers on Thanksgiving or they're toast.
Yeah, they're done if that doesn't happen. Cincinnati might be done. They have to run the table, but Pittsburgh, Dallas, okay, Tennessee on the road. You mentioned Cleveland from the other side of it before, and then Denver, Pittsburgh, and at Pittsburgh. I think the Bengals are too far gone at this point. There was a chance before, but now I think it's over for them.
Indy, just wildly unimpressive again. They're just not good. They're better than
They're not.
They're better than those 2 and 3 win teams, but they're not like. Even if they did make the playoffs, they would be the easiest bet against team ever in the first round of the playoffs.
No, completely. The biggest thing is we saw the positive from Anthony Richardson, but then even saw some positives within the same game that we still saw some negatives and the same concerns, and that when it's off, it's bad. And honestly, the game plan to beat them seems to be what you brought up a week ago, and it's the Jets' game plan is just bottle up Jonathan Taylor, don't let him get anything going, and then deal with the rest of the team as be.
It seemed like there was, if you asked Chat GPT to give you a game plan for the Lions, and it was the most basic blueprint possible, that's what they did, and it worked.
I mean, isn't that basically what the Jets did too?
Yeah, just, they're the Jets, so obviously they can't actually execute anything.
They got the one part of it, they just didn't complete it.
Do you think Purdy comes back this week?
I think because their playoff line, yeah. I think it could be he comes back this week, and then if they lose, they're done for the season.
Cause I've heard different things, just like different rumblings, whether oh yeah, he's actually going to be fine. It's a 1 week injury, and I've also heard he's actually done for the season. They're just not saying it yet.
Yeah, I've heard both as well, which is why look at Buffalo. Doesn't seem like even a winnable game with the way this team is just. I feel bad for them. It's just they've suffered every bad luck situation you can have this year. You lose that game at Buffalo, even the rest of the schedule. Yeah, you get Bears, Rams at home, Dolphins, the Lions, Cardinals. But the problem is now you have to. If you lose this game against Buffalo, you have to run the slate because they already got 6 losses. So you got to get 10-7 to get in.
Ooh,
maybe they can get 9-8.
Yeah, but the problem with them is their division record is so bad that they probably do need to get to 10 wins because they just lose the tiebreak to Arizona.
Nah, is it that bad?
They're 1-3 in division.
Yeah, they're 1-3, and they're 3-5 in the conference. So yeah, they do need to get to 10-7. They basically can afford one more loss, so they have to run they lose to Buffalo, they have to run the table. If they win that game against Buffalo, but I could see Purdy being shut down. Maybe not this week, but maybe next. Either way, it's probably happening at some point if he's not 100%.
Yeah, what they're praying for, because they have the Lions in Week 17, is that the Lions end up with a 3-game lead over the next 3 weeks or so if Minnesota and Green Bay drop
They play half a game?
And they're just yeah, whatever. We'll rest up for the playoffs.
Oh, they wouldn't rest in Week 17. They might do it halfway through.
Sure, but that's advantageous for San Francisco.
Sure. Although, there's a chance that the Lions could be up 35-7 by the second quarter.
Especially with the way that the Niners defense looked against Green Bay. And maybe this happens sometimes that defenses just wilt a little bit when they just know nothing's going to happen on offense. I feel like that's what happened to the Jets this year and their offense. I know last year they had to be so locked in because they knew Zach Wilson was just not going to do anything. That if they had any chance of winning, it was going to be on the defense. I felt like they've taken a step back this year, and a lot of it had to do with, hey, the offense should be a lot better. And it's just not. And then now they're not as good.
It's possible. I don't know. It's a little deep for what the defense is just thinking whatever. It's is that the Giants? They're we don't care. We know we're losing.
Well, no,
we're out of here.
I think a lot of it has to come down to game planning. When you game plan for a certain quarterback, it did seem like San Francisco just tried to run exactly the same Brock Purdy offense they've been running all year long, and that Brandon Allen just wasn't able to run it. The amount of false starts that they had was outrageous.
Well, that's the thing. It's it actually makes sense given Brandon Allen's style. Brandon Allen is actually similar to Brock Purdy. He's just not good like Brock Purdy is. That's the problem. His finger paintings suck.
I thought Caleb Williams looked pretty good under pressure against Minnesota, against a tough D. He looked better than he had when he was under pressure in the first half of the season, he just looked terrible. He looked a little bit better and, frankly, somewhat competent. He missed some easy throws to Roma Dunze coming down the stretch, but he still eventually got there. They probably could have won the game in regulation, honestly, if they had been a bit more precise. But he wasn't just scrambling around and making terrible decisions like he normally does, which is really nice to see. Since they've got the new OC, he's looked a lot better.
He has looked a lot better. It's not perfect. There was still time in that game where it's he's playing pretty good. And then I forget when it was exactly in the game, but it was one of those ones where it was run around and try to hero it, and ended up being a terrible play. But then there's also times where like the biggest thing is they're doing the make your decision quick and potentially run, and he's running, and actually made a terrific throw that won down the sideline when he scrambled to the right to the close side of the screen, heading to the right side of the screen, and scrambled and made that throw. It's just a beautiful placement. And that's what he can do, but that also means like you can't run around for 10 seconds and do that, because that's the one that happened earlier. So there was definitely positive signs that continue to move along. DJ Moore had a good game. Keenan Allen, his best game since week 12 of last year, like best game ever. I still like what's happening with the Dunze, but it's finally starting to be that what people thought when he was drafted is like, oh, the best complement of 3 wide receivers any rookie's ever had. It's starting to get there, which I think for anything for power rankings is that like they're now a threat to teams potentially trying to get in the playoffs.
For sure. Like they probably should have won the game against Minnesota. Yeah, they shouldn't have, and then they should have, and then they didn't win. So you have to take it with a grain of salt that way. That Minnesota kind of curb stomped them for a bit, was up by a bunch, then tried to give it all away. It took an onside kick in order to force overtime. But once overtime hit, I thought that they were going to win, but it just didn't happen.
The overtime felt like it fell apart.
Tier 7 is 2 teams, the Jets and the Browns. I discussed this with Tim. Do you want to see a challenge trade in the offseason? Rodgers to Cleveland for Deshaun Watson? Just for hilariousness?
What would Tim do?
I don't know. He went on a pretty big rant on Sunday defending Aaron Rodgers, so I want to see his defense of Deshaun Watson next year.
Oh, hey, you sure you want to do that? You might get canceled.
Yeah, Costa's uncancelable. But these 2 teams, they're just going nowhere. They're no fun. I guess the snow game was fun. Cleveland is infinitely more fun with Jameis. Just, I don't think you can take away that much from a game where people didn't have their footing underneath of them.
I also don't know. Well, they had their footing underneath them for two-thirds of the game. And then at the end of that, and like for everybody out there that maybe tuned out at some point, or I don't know, because I got a lot of, you still had Pickens inside your top 15. That was a miscommunication. That had nothing to do with the weather. That was Russell Wilson threw it here, Pickens broke right. That would have happened in a dome. It was a miscommunication, and of course, the next touchdown goes to Calvin Austin. Both teams still had success once the snow came down, so I'm not putting too much fault on that. The more interesting thing here is just to talk about Browns for a second, is we actually had Zach Jackson on Sirius XM on Thursday, and he said, for forewarning for everybody in fantasy, that DTR is coming before the end of the year. Like, they're going to make the switch because Winston's not coming back, and they need to start evaluating for next year. And they're going to, even though they think they know, and most people have the book on who DTR really is, Thompson Robinson is going to be under center at some point, and it might happen as early as this week.
Oh, that's not good. I mean, Tillman might miss this week with a concussion anyway, although it's the extended rest, he could be back. But Judy has been
Judy's been fun.
Yeah, Judy's been a print fest since Jameis took over. It's been great. Yeah,
so heads up on that one. Don't place any bets on your Browns players for this week until we find out.
Yeah, no, that's a good shout. Offensive Rookie of the Year. Do you know what the odds are?
On who's the favorite?
Just what, like the top 3 in odds, the names and the numbers associated with them. What do you think they are?
So, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, and then I don't know. I could see it being open.
It's Brock Bowers. He's number 3
right
now. How big of a favorite do you think Jaden Daniels is for Rookie of the Year?
Now?
Yeah. As of
today. I'd say slim. I'd say Nick's closed the door to it's almost like if I was throwing it out, I'd say not even 100 behind him.
You're correct. Jaden Daniels minus 140 to be Offensive Rookie of the Year. Bo Nix plus 120.
There you go.
I think Bo Nix might have a chance to grab this.
I think he might have a chance too, because you're going to get the bye week, which is going to give them the opportunity. Oh, no, they both have week 14. So never mind on that point. I think it's just going to come down to the final month of the season and then being neck and neck. And we just talked about it, the Denver schedule the rest of the season. How winnable is that one?
Denver, I mean, they have the Indy game. Like I said, if they win the Indy game, they should be good just based on all the time. Like, that gives them such a lead.
I got to tell you.
Yeah.
Here's what it comes down to. To your point earlier with the whole Lamar Jackson argument that you and I had, if Bo Nix is the reason they go into LA and beat the Chargers, and then depending on what's going on with that Chiefs game, Bo Nix is going to win it.
It's crazy to think, right? He's looked really good the past 3 weeks.
He has. I will say this. This comes down to Sean Payton. And I know everybody hates Sean Payton for the running backs, but it goes back to fit and style. It's just Bo Nix fits the Sean Payton offense similar to Drew Brees did. It's the whole argument of Michael Thomas when he was drafted by the Saints. It has to do with Brock Purdy playing for Shanahan. Sometimes the perfect fit can maximize the talent. And Bo Nix on 2/3 of the rest of the league sucks. I can tell you that much. He's just in a really good fit with what Sean Payton's asking him and wanting him to do. And it was ugly to start this season. I'm not a Bo Nix fan. And I like what Payton's been able to get out of him.
I tend to agree with you. Yeah. If you put him in, like, he could probably run the Dolphins off. He could probably run the Lions offense.
Yeah, he could. You put him in the Falcons, he falls apart.
Yeah, but like on the Niners, he'd probably be pretty good. If you put him in the Bills offense, he'd probably be terrible.
Yeah.
But
you put him on the Saints where it's throw it deep or try to find something else, probably falls apart.
I think Daniel still ends up getting there, especially if Washington makes the playoffs. He's almost guaranteed to win this just because he's just a more popular player and he's just more exciting than Bo Nix. And he had more pub all season long, even if they have fallen off a little bit. But I do think that I haven't looked at the Coach of the Year odds. I assume Sean Payton is the favorite. Coach of the Year, let's see. No, Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell.
I was just about to.
Sean Payton is 5th in odds at 6-1. I think that's the bet.
That's a decent one. I was going to say Dan Campbell would be. I mean, they only have one loss. So.
Dan Campbell had his chance to win, then he didn't win. Very rarely do you see a team that's supposed to be really good and then they are good, then that coach wins the Coach of the Year.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people thought like the Lions, they're supposed to be good, but it was still like, are they going to Lions us? I mean, to go back to your point about the point differential, they're almost at 200-point differential, whatever the number is now. They're almost doubling up whatever I remember seeing somebody tweet that out yesterday. They're almost doubling up the second team in point differential.
Sure, but I don't, just to go back to the voters, to put your mind into the voters, they're not like, oh, well, their odds of preseason were this, and then they're
right.
they're the Lions, so they were going to underachieve. People would look at it and be like, oh, they were the co-favorites to win the NFC, and they won the NFC. They did what they were supposed
What's Harbaugh?
to. Harbaugh is 3rd. He's 5-1.
Okay. I was going to say then you're talking about Chargers Harbaugh, right?
Yeah. Chargers.
Okay. Jim, not John.
Well, it's funny because obviously he went in. I mean, you said that people expected them to have a top 5 pick. I mean, their win total was like 8.5, so that's not true. Denver was expected to be really bad, and I think
their win total was 8.5. Sorry, I go back to the Chargers were really 8.5.
Yeah,
I'm shocked. Okay.
I mean, I bet the over,
continue.
so that's where I went. And obviously,
kudos to you.
Obviously, they're almost there. That he has changed the culture, and that will be attributed to him. But they were supposed to be like respectable, and he's made them above that. Like they're supposed to be a game or two above, game or two below, and they're going to overachieve on that. Maybe that gets him the nod. Kevin O'Connell. Maybe, but I feel like a lot of the emphasis is being put on Flores and how good the defense is. Like, if you're just trying to create narratives, I think the Tomlin voodoo stuff, it depends on how they end the season because he's 4th at 5.5. With Peyton, he's the one guy that you point to that Denver wasn't supposed to be good, and everything is kind of attributed to Sean Payton in this situation. So if Jaden Daniels wins Offensive Rookie of the Year and Bo Nix doesn't, I think that Peyton ends up winning Coach of the Year.
I could see all that.
Because he fits.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
He fits the narrative of the coach who was the reason that his team was good.
Yes, but you need the Broncos to make the playoffs.
Yeah, so like even to look back on it, the last time that a coach coached a team that was supposed to be good that won Coach of the Year was John Harbaugh in 2019. They went 14-2, and they weren't even supposed to be that good that year. But that's the year that Lamar took the leap.
Yeah. So what if the Lions go 15-2?
Maybe, but I mean, does Andy Reid win if the Chiefs go 16-1?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Does Sirianni win if they only lose 2 games?
I was just about to say, for everybody that wanted to fire Sirianni, like, what if that team goes 15-2?
But like when you play the expectation game, just look at the past 4 winners. Like Stefanski's won twice in the past 4 years by taking Bad's Brown team to the playoffs. Dayball won with the Giants when they were supposed to be bad and made the playoffs. Vrabel won with the Titans when they were supposed to be bad and went 12-5. Just saying that if the Broncos end up at like 10-7 or 11-6 or something like that, I think it's Peyton's.
Well, then wait. What's Dan Quinn?
Dan Quinn is 14-1 right now. But again, I think that people are putting the emphasis on Jaden Daniels for them being so good, not Dan Quinn.
And they know that he has not a lot to do with the offense.
Yeah,
So.
like it very much feels like a read between the lines type thing. The only other one I could see winning it right now is Mike McDonald is 28-1. That if the Seahawks ran the table and all of a sudden their defense has looked as good as it has the past 2 weeks, I think that he would be a very viable candidate. Like we bet Stefanski last year around this time, and he was like 25-1, I think he was. And then all of a sudden it was Dayball the year before. He was like 14-1, 18-1. It's like you can just kind of see the path of where this is going. The only other one I would think about would be Todd Bowles. He's 50-1. And if the Bucs actually do run the table and win the South, I could see him winning.
Yeah, I think well, I'd still say if Tampa Bay ran through and made the playoffs and the Broncos made the playoffs, I would still take Sean Payton, though.
I would too, but you're like at 50-1, you're kind of playing against those expectations.
Right.
That the Broncos fall off a little bit, Tampa Bay surges, even though they're playing absolute jabroni teams. Not that Todd Bowles is actually, he's not even a good coach, that he's actually doing something, but that you play with that narrative a little bit. Like if the Bucs reel off 2 more wins here, Bulls is going to go from 50-20 in 2 weeks. So you can get yourself 30 points of CLV right there. And then he actually has a chance to do it. All it takes is a Minnesota loss, a Lions loss, the Chargers losing a close game to the Ravens, and then Jim Harbaugh falls off a little bit. So the field opens up a little bit more for Coach of the Year. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's Pat's Coach of the Year take for future awards. It's probably just going to be Dan Campbell. The final tier, as we get out of here, is all the regular teams that you would expect to see in the bottom tier. It's New England, Carolina, Dallas, Vegas, Tennessee, the Giants, and Jacksonville to end things
Yeah,
off.
you finally put him second to last.
I won a lot of money betting against the Giants this week. I'll tell you that much.
Good. I tried to get you to put him second to last for like the past 3 weeks.
Well,
Finally got there.
If they played Drew Lock, they would be higher than this. But instead, they're playing Tommy DeVito.
But they're not going to.
DeVito,
because they would owe Drew Lock more money if he plays.
Would Tommy DeVito be a starting quarterback in the XFL? I don't think he would.
XFL, yeah.
I don't think so.
Because he can run.
I don't think he's as good as PJ
He's already
Walker.
been in that. Yeah, but PJ Walker lasted for a little bit. You don't have to, PJ Walker was, 2, 3, it came back to the NFL too. So no, he's not PJ Walker, he deserves to not be in the NFL. But look at some of the starting quarterbacks once you get to the bottom. He'd be the bottom. I'm not saying he'd be the top tier starter in the XFL, but he's already also been announced as the starter for Week 13. Shocker.
So probably need to bet Dallas on Thanksgiving then.
Oh yeah, hell, in a short week, Dallas. I tell you, there's 5%. I want to come back to the Giants, and I was rooting for Dallas to win and the Raiders to win and get that top 2 pick.
I've been throwing this out all week. How do you like my Drake May is just fancy Will Levis take?
He's better than that.
Maybe
he's better than that.
Maybe he is.
I would say he's the midpoint of Daniel Jones to Josh Allen. I'll give you the comparison I made when he came out of college. It's from the same school. He's smarter Sam Howell.
Oh. That feels more scathing than my fancy Will Levis take.
No, because Sam Howell was good. The problem is he threw way too many stupid throws, which led to a ton of turnovers. He was dumb throwing the ball. You take Sam Howell's skill set and you put a smart quarterback mind with him, and you're going to have a potential, I don't think he gets there, potential top 10 quarterback. If nothing else, he is at least middle of the pack.
I don't know. You think that he's smart. I heard he's married to his high school girlfriend. That seems like a very stupid thing to me. I mean, I'm not American. I don't know how this works, but if I was an NFL quarterback, I'd want to get in some pussy. I'm not going to lie to you.
Wow. Should I call up my sister who married her high school sweetheart?
Hey, I know 3 people who married their high school sweetheart, all divorced before 30. Couldn't imagine.
Well, now you know a 4th who's not.
Yeah, I mean, she probably did. She hate this guy? She looking for something else on the side?
No.
Are you sure?
No.
You sure?
I'm positive.
All right. I don't know.
I'm about to drive to Canada and talk about my sister.
Well, I mean, you're the one who brought it up. You didn't have to bring it up. I'm just saying.
I was bringing her up as a good example of how it can work.
I don't know. Maybe it's an American thing. Just up here, people like to taste the menu a little bit before they commit for the rest of their life. That's all I'm saying. For an NFL quarterback, it's going to be very tough for old Drake May in that spot. So I don't know how smart it's going to be for him, when he's divorced in 2 years from his high school sweetheart. That's what I'm saying.
You took this in a whole other world right now.
I know. I'm just looking for ways to pile on because Patriots fans keep coming at me. So I'm experimenting new takes every single week.
That's where you're going with this?
Yeah, I mean, just if you get to see him on the field, that he looks great when he's down 30 points. Other than that, I don't know.
He's also thrown to jabronis too.
I mean, so is Bo Nix.
Yeah, he's got Cortland Sutton.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just Cortland Sutton, that guy that we all just love so much. He is so great, Cortland Sutton.
He's on a completely another tier than anybody on the Patriots.
Yeah, you wouldn't have said that until he got Bo Nix.
We said that beforehand.
We
were actually saying Cortland Sutton's going to go from being a good wide receiver to ruined because he's on now has Bo Nix.
Okay. I mean, this is the same guy that everyone said was worse than Jerry Jeudy.
No, I don't know who was saying that.
I mean, everyone besides you, because you're always right?
No, I was completely wrong on the Chargers thing. I legit thought they were like projected way lower than the 8.5. So there you go. I was wrong on this show.
All right. Well, I shall talk to you next week. I hope you have a good Thanksgiving.
I hope you do too, even though yours was already over, last month?
Yeah, it was like 6 weeks ago. I get to have fun. I get to have fun on Thanksgiving. I have to see any of my fucking family. I can watch football all day. It's great.
You don't have to talk about divorce?
No one in my family's married besides me, so we don't actually have to.
Congratulations, I guess.
Yeah, I'm the first one in the family besides my grandparents to get married. It's fantastic news.
Anyway.
And I had to wait until my early 30s in order to get married too. You know, you had to taste the menu, Jake. That's what you got to do. You got to get out there. You got to see what you like. Then you can make your decision.
Here.
All right. I'm sorry I made you uncomfortable. You can follow Jake on X at AllInKid and follow him at The Athletic. Smash like, sub to the channel while you are here, and I will see you next time.
Experience! Experience!